What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the TDR show. Welcome back after your 4th of July weekend. If you guys celebrated, I hope everybody had a safe, fun 4th of July. I know we did here with our kids at the pool, at Legoland, doing all kinds of fun stuff out here for the children. But we're back, and we're talking Devy versus Dynasty, a fun show here. We like doing this show throughout the year, but it's basically a would you rather or this or that, kind of who would you rather have on your roster here if you play in the format. And it's kind of combining the formats here, but it's basically putting up Devy hype, like who are some of the hype guys out there versus the Dynasty players that actually, score you points and make you money. And who would you rather have on your roster? We're doing this also because we just dropped a giant July update of our rankings. We ranked over 800 players. We have combined rankings on there. And basically we took our rankings here and I said, hey, here are some interesting spots. If you are in a startup right now, who would you rather have based on these players? So this is a fun show. This is a lot of fun to talk about and debate here. So we're going to be debating 5 players. And of course I added some rapid fire questions that Jay has no idea who those players are because he loves talking quick and just answering as fast as he can on the rapid fire segment there. So stick with us here. If you're on the YouTube channel, hit that like and subscribe button. If you're over on the podcast, we appreciate you guys a ton. All right, starting off hot here on the first one. We got Jeremiyah Smith, Ohio State wide receiver, versus Malik Nabers, New York Giants wide receiver here. So here we got 2 alphas, Jay. 2 alphas go right off the bat here when we're looking at this. Jeremiyah Smith is the wide receiver 1 overall, Devy player overall 1 out there. Malik Nabers, top 6 Dynasty wide receiver ADP. He's got the elite draft capital you like. He's got that immediate impact upside. They are right next to each other in our rankings here based on the stats last year. Now, again, these will be, obviously there's context needed for, the Giants offense, what it was. But Jeremiyah Smith checks the boxes at every category here, beats Malik Nabers from last year. Receiving grade on PFF, 89.8. Yards per out run, 3.15. ADOT, 12.8. 1,300 yards and 15 touchdowns. Malik, though, had a great year, too. 7 touchdowns, 1,200 yards, 9.7 ADOT, which probably can be contributed to their quarterback play. Yards per out run is 2.17, 87.1 receiving grade. Both elite prospects, both excellent at what they are. I think both are going to get, when you're thinking of capital, right there. Jeremiyah Smith, probably top 5 capital there. So on the clock, Jay, where are you leaning with both of these guys here? This is a fun one because this obviously is the immediate production versus the value of what Jeremiyah Smith can be. But Jeremiyah Smith is high up there in rankings.
This is one notch below asking me which is my favorite child, I think, because these 2 players are really, really great. And for me, this is a hard decision. We do these combined rankings where we're doing Dynasty and Devy in the same rankings, and these 2 players are lined up right next to each other. And I just can't squeak Jeremiyah Smith above Malik Nabers yet, just because of the value that Malik Nabers had last year, what he was able to do as a rookie without a QB. And it's sort of that dominance in terms of winning now type of decision here. Mm-hmm. That's the part that's the tough part for me, is that I think it's hard to pick, even though Jeremiyah Smith is the best player in college football, the best wide receiver in college football, going to be a top 10, top 5 pick when it's his turn. It's really hard to give up what you got right now in Malik Nabers, which is a top 4, maybe top 3 Dynasty wide receiver for a very long time. And there's less uncertainty because he's already been drafted. We already know what he is in the pros. And hopefully the QB situation improves over time for the New York Giants. So I have to go with Malik Nabers, but for me, it's really, really close between the 2 because Jeremiyah Smith is one of my favorite Devy players that we've seen come out in years. So I'm really excited for him to be. And the fact that we have a Devy player ranked as our wide receiver 5 tells you something about how good this player is, considering that we want to like have that buffer in there for that. This is a Devy player and he hasn't gone to the NFL and he hasn't played in the NFL yet. So you always have to have that little bit of extra in there, that skepticism in there, because it hasn't quite happened. But of all the guys right now, of all the guys in the last few years, Jeremiyah Smith, I'm pretty confident in him and his ability That's why we have him ranked so high. But Malik Nabers, really, really good. I like Malik Nabers.
So my question for you here, does this come down to maybe team build at all for you in a Devy league? So like when you're thinking of like, so for example, everybody out there, we're doing one thing we like to do in our Discord, our Patreon, stuff that we like to do. We'll do it like at least once a month, or we try to do it twice a month, depending on time. We do a Dynasty Devy combined draft. And we basically say, okay, let's just run through a mock here. Where would you value these guys? And Malik, he goes across the board. He went as wide receiver 3 actually in this one. So like, but he goes from anywhere from wide receiver 3 to 5. He got drafted at 110 in this one that we're doing now. 207 was Jeremiyah Smith. So he went wide receiver 7-ish. He went after Amon-Ra, Puka, Lamb, Thomas. So where I can see that, I understand that there. So maybe that line is the Marvin Harrison tier, the Drake London tier, the Nico tier, where you're like, no, I'll take Jeremiyah Smith's upside there because I think he could be Amon, Puka, Lamb, Thomas, Nabers as soon as he gets drafted. I tend to lean Nabers too. Like, I think that when you're thinking of like, who would you rather have in a startup, even if you are team build wise, I don't see why adding Nabers is necessarily like, whether you're building, you're doing productive struggle, whether you're doing the one year punt, whatever you're doing, whatever strategy you want. I mean, Nabers is up there. I guess the one thing I would say is Nabers could maybe lose value depending on that quarterback situation, what it looks like. That would be the only caveat I would say, where Jeremiyah Smith, without like an injury, he's going to be the one. Like, he's number 1 next year in this format. He's going to do that in terms of value there. So like, I guess I kind of answered my own question. I don't necessarily think startup or build matters for both of these guys here. I could see an avenue though, where you take Jeremiyah Smith though as wide receiver 3 or 4 overall. And I get it from the value perspective because you're still getting an elite prospect and he's an elite piece on your Devy roster. But I understand like Malik here. So I lean Malik, but I get the Jeremiyah Smith side. I get it from a value side. I get it from like, hey, if he goes top 5 and gets drafted and we haven't even seen his upside yet, I don't think we've seen his ceiling, to be honest with you. We've seen his upside. But there's reports out there he's gained 15 pounds. Now, he hasn't listed that. I just use his listed weight in there. If he already gained 15 pounds again, I mean, you're in alpha territory. That's Jay's, used to be his favorite word there. He's an alpha. He's an alpha dog out there at 230 pounds. So I think it's very close. I think it's closer than we've ever seen in Devy formats, where like a guy like Malik and Jeremiyah were actually debating this. I still lean Malik a little bit. He's still on that side there. But I wouldn't fault someone taking Jeremiyah Smith.
Yeah, and I think it's just Malik for me that's the tough part to get over, because when you rattled off those names, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Puka Nacua, maybe even Brian Thomas Jr., Nico Collins, I kind of want Jeremiyah. This might be controversial, but I kind of want Jeremiyah Smith over those players, because I think Jeremiyah Smith, of all those players, is the guy that gets me to the Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Malik Nabers tier. That's where I want to be. I want to be in that high profile, that high upside type of tier, the wide receiver differentiated fantasy points, that 20 plus points per game zone area. And I think Jeremiyah is the guy that gets you there. Now, that's not to say that Brian Thomas Jr., Amon-Ra St. Brown, Puka can't get you in there, but are they going to be valued at the top 4, at the top 2 of the position? Maybe, maybe not. My guess is I like the odds of Jeremiyah Smith when he comes in being the guy that can get into that Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson zone in terms of value and how you draft those guys.
Yeah, I look right now. I have Malik at wide receiver 5, and I have Jeremiyah wide receiver 6. So I'm right there. So like in my rankings, that's where I kind of lean there. But I think that in a startup, I'm taking Jeremiyah over Puka, Brian Thomas pretty easily. Like I'm pretty much there. Like, and so those are my lines there. But because I have Malik and Jeremiyah right back to back, I could lean either way there. I mean, they're both fantastic players. All right, let's get into a fun one. Starting with quarterbacks here. I had to pick one of Jay's lovely men, JJ McCarthy, Minnesota quarterback. We just did a C2C startup where our board Jay basically drafted every guy we've talked about here on this podcast. He loves them all. He's his guys. But we got JJ McCarthy last year. So what I did for stats for JJ is I took his 2023 stats from Michigan. So his national championship winning year. I just want to point that out. When he played for Michigan Wolverines. So he had 22 touchdowns, 2,900 yards, almost 3,000, 2.9 turnover worthy play percentage, 5.9 big time throw percentage, and 87.3 passing grade that year. Obviously last year was injured. We didn't see him there. Then we're going to have him against Arch Manning, quarterback out of Texas. most people's QB1 of Devy, like pretty much solid in there. I haven't seen anybody really rank anybody else higher than him. There is some LaNorris sellers, truthers out there who we will talk about. Again, with the numbers, it's hard because obviously JJ had more playing time. We saw basically 3 starts last year for Manning, 81.0 passing grade in those starts, 6.4 big time throw percentage, which is pretty good. And in turnover worthy play percentage at 1.9, which, hey, in a limited sample size, we'll still take that. Like that's not a bad showing there. 939 yards and 9 touchdowns for him last year. And I think it's a great question here because it's all upside between both of these guys. Like I think we know the draft capital with JJ got first round capital. We think we know what Arch Manning's capital is going to be. And it's like, hey, could be first round, but there's always that could be here. So that's the big question mark here. I'll let Jay talk because I know this is like pitting 2 of his next favorite kids. If he ever had 4 kids there,
it's like you went through and picked like the hardest matches to pick here for me.
Well, that is my job. My job is to pick a good show.
What school did JJ go to? I forget. I can't remember. Did they win a championship or something?
Jay, I can't come on here and be like, who would you rather have, Arch Manning or Geno Smith? Come on, we gotta get big. We gotta go big here.
Okay, so my point to this would be that I think JJ McCarthy showed what we want to see out of Arch Manning. He showed that in college already, and then he went off and got drafted, and then he got drafted to an incredible situation with Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings, and you got Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson there, and TJ Hawkinson catching the balls from him. Yes, he got injured last year, but what we want out of Arch Manning, JJ McCarthy already showed that. He showed that through college. He won. He did really well on stuff that matters and is predictive to NFL future success. He got drafted highly, and he's in a great situation. Everything we still need to see from Arch is we saw 3 games. We think it's really, really good. He's got, the great last name. He looks good. It looks like he can run a little bit too, so we like it from a fantasy perspective. And he'll probably come out his 4th year, and he'll probably be maybe the first overall pick in that draft. You hope that's the case, but we still haven't seen it quite yet for Arch Manning. Now, Arch Manning's case, he's in a great situation too there at Texas with Sark and all the weapons he has around him. So he is in the perfect situation to succeed and increase his value even higher than where he is, which in Devy drafts is right around, pick 2 or pick 3, definitely top 4, but he's high up there. The problem is Arch Manning isn't quite what JJ McCarthy has already done it. He did it in college. He got drafted, and now we're going to see what he can do in the NFL. Arch Manning is the hope of that to happen. You hope that happens for Arch Manning because, the setup is really nice with Texas, with all the weapons. What he showed in those 3 games is really nice, and you just hope that continues and gets higher. But it will be that 4th-year player. And you just hope that he puts up the stats that you want. So here, I got to go with JJ McCarthy again. I'm going with the veteran, the win now, the hope, as opposed, or not the hope. I guess this is kind of hope because we haven't seen him play in the NFL quite yet. But just with the setup with how he is and how he performed in college, I got to go with JJ McCarthy's value right now as opposed to Arch Manning. Even though Arch Manning could be the guy that his overall price, his overall value is higher, his upside ends up being higher than JJ McCarthy when it's all said and done. Right now, I'm going to go with the maybe less of a risk with JJ McCarthy.
Yeah, this is a tough one. I was looking at our rankings, and by the way, Christian, you hate JJ McCarthy. I just noticed that our overall rankings here, if you're out there listening, I know you don't listen to us, but 98 overall, sir, we need to talk about that. But I'm the highest on JJ. I have JJ overall, my overall rankings for Devy and Dynasty combined at 25. And I have Arch at 55. Jay's the highest on Arch, actually, sitting there at 45. And then Christian's a little higher than me, too. So I'm the low man there. I think I lean, obviously, I have a Michigan bias because I'm a Michigan fan. But I just lean the system that McCarthy's in and with Justin Jefferson. I mean, when you think of like what he could be with his rushing upside too, I think in this format, I am notoriously hate QBs, right? In this format and Devy, I just say, hey, don't like the ups, I don't like the risk there. I don't like the risk there. If I already know what the risk is with JJ is that he just didn't play last year, but when you on the opposite side, he's throwing the Addison Hawkinson, JJ, Justin Jefferson. He's going to be in O'Connell's system, which is amazing. He's going to have a strong offensive line group. I think it's better than last year. I think it's going to be, built around him there, the system. That's what you build in, right? And he already has the capital. If he's already got the capital, I'm less concerned about a quarterback in that way, in this format. And I think he's a great QB2. Like, that's just what I think. I think that he's a great QB2 in that format. Now, what is the argument for Arch? Here's what I would say. When you're thinking of Arch Manning, he's got the name, right? That matters. Like, that's one of those things. The ceiling is number 1 overall pick. So here's the other thing. Like, if Arch comes out in 2 years and is the number 1 overall pick, JJ's got to go, he better have 2 amazing years, or Arch is going to vault him in dynasty value as soon as he goes in that top 5. Probably if he's close to the Heisman this year, he's going to vault JJ in dynasty value. And you're talking about really big QB1 buzz, right? So this is really the ceiling versus floor play of like, where's that value going to be? Because I do think JJ can be a very solid starter in the league. And then you just have a solid QB2. Whereas Arch, you're like, oh, well, he's going to go 101. He's going to have that top 10 upside. He's got the rushing upside, which he does. He is a very fast Manning, right? There's not that many fast Mannings out there. So this is an interesting debate between both of these guys. I just lean with this high of capital where they're going in Devy drafts and dynasty startups, kind of where that ADP's at. To me, I look at it and I say, I have a hard time believing that Arch can really kind of hold that value for 2 years while I'm waiting to win, right? If this C2C, it's different. I know he's going to score me points. That's fine. But while I'm waiting to win, I think that's the question. When you're looking at the startup that we're doing right now, JJ has not been drafted in the startup that we're doing, and Arch just went at 407. So Arch Manning did go at 407, and he went right after Baker Mayfield. So JJ's coming up. Like, JJ's going to get drafted pretty soon here. I just, the guy that drafted Arch in this league, he's got Bo Nix. Now he just drafted Arch. So now he's got to wait, right? Now he's going heavy Devy. He also drafted Jeremiyah Smith. So he's got Arch Manning, Jeremiyah Smith, plus, Bo Nix and Justin Jefferson. I get it. Like, I understand kind of where that build is at. That's where you'll see that heavy Devy guy stuff. But I lean JJ here. I think I lean JJ just based on where he's at in that location, because we don't know where Arch is going to get drafted either. Can you imagine if he goes to the Saints? God help us, right? Like, and I love Kellen Moore, but just think of like where they go. That's a big part of it. We already have those mystery boxes checked with JJ. So if they're checked, I'm okay with kind of leaning with JJ.
Yeah, and we just went through a cycle where the 1.01 at quarterback, Cam Ward, it wasn't a very well thought of as quarterback class, but the first overall NFL draft pick to the Tennessee Titans, Cam Ward, he's not being valued very highly across the board. He's getting drafted mid to late QB2 range. That's not how we're viewing Arch Manning. We view Arch Manning very, very highly for a Devy quarterback. And we think that he's going to be up there. If he is the first overall pick in 2 years, he's going to command that premium type of valuation. Like you said, we got him going already very high in a startup draft. There's lots of risk, though. These Devy quarterbacks, there is risk. Mm-hmm. We don't know exactly how it's going to place out until you start playing in the NFL. We don't know exactly how it's going to go. But the hope is that this guy crushes it and it becomes a first overall pick in 2 years and then does well in the NFL. But that's just hope. Right now, J.J. McCarthy crushed it in college, and he got a great landing spot and was a first-round pick. So, right now that's kind of feels a little bit more certain than what you get from Arch Manning at this point.
Yeah, and to be honest, if we're thinking about, like, it's funny you say, well, we don't know what he's going to be in the NFL. We don't really know what he's going to be in the SEC either. So, like, we haven't seen it yet. Like, and he's got a huge game against Ohio State at the shoe, right? Like, that's going to tell us a lot. But there are a ton of question marks. Remember, everybody keeps telling me he didn't beat out Quinn Ewers last year, which is a tired-ass argument, by the way. Like, it drives me crazy when I see it on social media. Like, that is a Sark decision because he was being loyal to his senior, who he had come there, like all of that stuff that had less to do with Arch Manning, probably nothing to do with Arch Manning. Like, it just is a dumb argument, in my opinion, there. But we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. But yeah, you're right in terms of the SEC, the NFL. What is that going to look like for him there? All right, let's get to another one. We haven't picked a Devy guy yet, but let's see if we do here. We got running backs on board here. We got Jeremiyah Love, Notre Dame running back, versus Bucky Irving, former Oregon running back. Kind of came out of nowhere last year, right? When we're thinking of what his role was, and he popped off. When you're thinking of Love, this is what he did last year. An amazing year for the Irish. 91.8 rush grade, 62 missed tackles forced, 24 explosive runs, so 10 yards or more, 1,100 yards, just over 1,100 yards rushing, 17 touchdowns. And Bucky had a breakout year for Tampa Bay in his rookie year, right? When we're thinking of what he did, almost 1,200 yards, 8 touchdowns, 29 rushes of 10 yards or more, 62 missed tackles forced. They actually tied, which I double checked that 3 times. I was like, did they really tie? Yeah, they did. And a 90.0 rushing grade. And, down the stretch, outside of one game, he was a league winner in fantasy football, right? Now, this is also one of those things where these guys are closer in age than the last couple guys that we've talked about. So Jeremiyah is coming out this year, probably. I mean, most likely 2026 class, he is going to be the running back 1 or 2 right now. Things happen. So this is a closer battle, I think, in terms of what Bucky is, when we're thinking of draft capital. But what do we think here with these running backs, Jay? What are you looking at in terms of where you're going to draft these guys?
I might be maybe a little bit too high on Bucky Irving right now because of his year last year, but I thought that was a pretty phenomenal year. And for me, it's hard not to take Bucky Irving here. My take on Jeremiyah Love is right now he's my RB1 of that class, but it's a shaky RB1 because I don't see anybody in that top echelon of prospects for the 2026 class yet. I haven't found anybody that fits into that premium. Even Jeremiyah Love, who largely gets thought of as, the best running back in that class. There are some, in the data profile, there are some things that aren't exactly perfect there. So Jeremiyah Love needs another good year. It's not one of those where he can just rely on what happened in year 1 and 2. He needs another good year for him to get, I think, that really high draft capital and then do well. But Jeremiyah Love has a lot of explosiveness, and there's a lot to his game. And right now he is my 2026 RB1. It's just hard right now. I don't think I can put him. It's not a perfect profile, so I don't think I can put him above any of those guys that are young, that are in my RB1, RB2, RB3 kind of range. RB1 range. I think the Devys, they fit for the running backs for this class, fit in that RB2 range, and that's where I kind of fall where Jeremiyah falls for me in that regard. So I think I'm going to take the Bucky Irving. I think Bucky Irving put up a lot of fantasy points last year. I think he is set up really well again to do the same thing in the same system. So I like that him who went on a dramatic rise from being drafted to then having a great season. I think he's got even more probably upside if he continues this run for him. But that's kind of, I think I'm going to take the certainty of Bucky Irving, who did it in the NFL, as opposed to a maybe there again with the Devy asset in a not as great 2026 class running back class as we saw for the 2025 class. He looks maybe a little bit better than the rest of them, or close. There might be a couple other players there, but it's not like the tier 1 type of players that you're seeing in this class, even with Jeremiyah Love, who largely is, thought gets drafted in for 2026 rookie mocks very highly. So that just tells you how well or how we thought of this 2026 class coming up.
This is a tough one for me because Bucky came in. I like Bucky, and with what he did, going through his numbers. So there were 7 games in which he played more than half of the snaps for the Buccaneers because he didn't really start off strong. And in the playoff game, he averaged almost 130 yards from scrimmage and scored 6 touchdowns. The dude was just volume, right? When you think of volume. Now he does have a new offensive coordinator, right? So he lost his offensive coordinator over to Jacksonville, Liam Cohen. What does that look like? But down the stretch, I mean, when you go through the numbers after that bye week, 12 attempts, 25 attempts, 4, he got banged up that game, 15, 16, 20, 19 attempts. And then when you think of targets, he had 52 targets last year. And that's a lot of targets into that offense. Now, where the target's going to be this year, getting Emeka Egbuka. Obviously, they have Jalen McMillan. But getting Emeka Egbuka there, getting Godwin back, where does that come from? Obviously, losing Godwin. Mike Evans was banged up too. So that's where you saw a lot of those targets come from. However, I like the idea of getting Jeremiyah Love, though. Like, I think that there is some breakout potential there. He could be the running back one in the class on mock draft database. And even in the mock drafts we've done for the Quarters podcast, Randy had him going to the Dallas Cowboys in the first round. Again, just because he wants to troll me as well, just because we just don't take Cowboys running backs in the first round. So if that was to happen, like if he got first round capital, I do think he's close. But I got to stay true to my rankings. When I didn't realize how high I actually have Bucky higher than Jay. So, and I have Jeremiyah a little lower than that. So I'm going to stay with Bucky because in running backs, I reiterate this a lot. And I think there's one thing I hope a lot of people take away from what my advice is with running backs is what will they do for you the next day? Like, what are they going to do for you the next week? And to me, Bucky can be a league winning back the next day, right? Jeremiyah Love, while I think he is a great back at Notre Dame, we have seen running backs fall off the face of the planet before. And even in draft circles and draft stuff, they've talked about him as testing, right? If his testing doesn't go well, we could see him drop. Now, it doesn't mean he's not a good back. I get worried about backs that maybe struggle with athleticism, maybe struggle with like their upside potential from that perspective. So I'm going to take Bucky because he can give me something that next week, especially in Devy. It's one of those things where it's like, hey, can you provide, that value for me? It's one of those reasons why I've been really, really, I've got a lot of DMs and Discord over on our Discord and stuff asking me, about like Singleton, Kaytron Allen, a lot of running backs out there. And I've been like, hey, if you can get some dynasty pieces now, that's the way you go. Like I really, truly believe in selling some of these 2026 guys for some win now pieces if you're very close. So I can't go against my own advice and my own rankings here. So I'll take Bucky. But I do understand like Love being the running back one. And there's a lot of guys out there that love Jeremiyah Love. Like I bet you Christian would take Jeremiyah Love. So we might be just two guys here on the podcast, but our third co-host or third guy over here at the TDR, like he is to the point where he thinks Love is a very, very solid running back tier of his own prospect. If that's the case, I could definitely see him going Jeremiyah Love. So there's definitely avenues out there in terms of where he's getting valued. All right, we're going back to the wide receiver position. We got two guys here that I thought this was an interesting discussion based on other rankings because they're pretty close actually. And I might actually be the low man on the Chargers guy. McConkey, Chargers wide receiver. Last year, here's what he put up. When you're looking at 8 touchdowns, he had 1,300 yards, 10.7 ADOT, 2.59 yards per route run, 91 receiving grade. Had an amazing year. Going against Alabama wide receiver Ryan Williams, 6'1", 175, consensus Devy wide receiver 2, 71.7 receiving grade, yards per route run is 2.51. ADOT was sitting at 14.3. He was a big play guy. 865 yards and 8 touchdowns. He scored many touchdowns as Lad out there. This is fun because, this is a different conversation we were having with like what their offense looks like. Lad produced a lot last year, but they drafted Trey Harris. It was Trey Harris, right? I think it was Trey Harris. They drafted Trey Harris. They drafted Omar Hampton. They got Najee Harris. They're a very run-centric team, right? In Greg Roman's scheme, like you're going to see that. So will Lad duplicate this, or is Lad being overvalued? And do you want to wait for Ryan Williams, who had a good start to the year? But let's be real. After that Georgia game where he had an amazing year on the sideline and they won the game, he was pretty mediocre down the stretch. Now, you can blame that on Milroe if you want, Jalen Milroe, the quarterback, the scheme, whatever. But he needs to bounce back a little bit to have that consensus wide receiver 2 value here. So where are you going with this one, Jay?
To me, this is more of like who has like the higher ceiling type of argument. And I think to me, it's Ryan Williams. So I'm going to go with him, but which is contrary to how I have him ranked, because right now I think, and maybe I need to adjust this, but I think what my point that I would want to make is I want to kind of, if I could move off of Lad McConkey into Ryan Williams with extra, that's where I feel like I would really love that type of deal. So if you were asking me straight up, I'd probably pick Ryan Williams for the upside, but really the way that the actual prices out there would go in the market, I think it would be Lad McConkey equals Ryan Williams plus something extra. And that's the side I think I want to take on that perspective. And it's not that I'm like a Lad McConkey hater. I think he's, for his age and for his dynasty price or value to him and how many points he scored, which I think was around 15 points per game last year, assuming that sticks and holds, I think he's a fine value for what you get out of him. But when I go and look through him being sort of wide receiver 10, wide receiver 11, when you have to draft him, and you can get a Ryan Williams who has that really high upside from that perspective. Yeah, I kind of want the higher ceiling, higher upside guy than from McConkey. Now, does Ryan Williams have the ability to get you into that 17, 18 points per game range? Yeah, I think so. Does McConkey have the ability to get you there, given that you have to take him at or pay back end wide receiver 1 prices for him? Now, so far, we think he's a 15, maybe 16 type of points per game type of guy. So from that perspective, I think I want to take the Ryan Williams. But the problem is you have to wait 2 years and you have to wait to see how this all plays out. But I'm pretty confident. I like him, and I like his projections and where he shapes up to be. I think he'll be at the top end of this 27 wide receiver class, right behind Jeremiah Smith. So I just think this is a higher ceiling type of higher upside type of play for him. Even though that's a bit more risky, we are sort of Devy guys, and we're looking at that, and we're trying to evaluate the risk and how long you have to wait versus how much you have to pay for now. But really, it's hard to justify him. It's hard to justify taking him when McConkey's value is so much higher. But I think if I was just to pick between the two, regardless of valuation, I probably want to pick Ryan Williams just for the upside over McConkey. But if I was doing it in fantasy, I'd want the extra if I was trading the two.
Okay. Well, we're going to disagree here. We're going to fight. This is the I'll take Lad. I think, and before I get the haters in the comments, the stats that we on the board is from playoffs too. So I did put the playoff stats in there too. So before I get like he only had 1,197 yards. He had over 1,300 because he had a huge playoff game. Lad did. He had 197 yards against the Texans, if people forget there. But I think with Lad, like, he was super efficient last year, right? Like the 2.59 yards per route run, like the 10.3 yards per target. When you think of that now, he had 112 targets too in 16 games. Like he was getting targeted the hell out of in the regular season. Now you're 100% correct. I think the ceiling is Ryan Williams. Like the ceiling is what he can be. He's only 18 years old. I think that he could have a huge year this year in that offense. And then we're talking about him being right up there with Jeremiah Smith. I just think McConkey offers a pretty safe floor with Justin Herbert and where he's going to get targeted. And I don't necessarily like when you think of that depth chart, he's still their wide receiver 1. And I do think when you're thinking of like, what they brought in on that roster and what they're trying to do, he's still like the number 1 option in the short game. He's going to be in the slot, creating the separation that he does. And I know they brought in Trey Harris. And I know they brought in Mike Williams and Quentin Johnson, but really what those guys are just going to be field stretchers that allows the field to open up for Lad. And I know there's a Rondé Gatson truthers out there. You guys are insane. Like they're the Tyler Conklin, Will Dissly, not so much. But that tight end position, I don't think that there's going to be enough volume going to that position. It's going to be Lad. And I think that we could see maybe either the same amount of touchdowns or more. But I'm going to go safe because I'm a wimp. That's kind of like the Lad area. And I'm also like, I don't know if I become a Ryan Williams hater, but I do think that Ryan Williams is closer to wide receiver 3 in Devy than to Jeremiah Smith. And that worries me. That concerns me with where he's going in value-wise because, when you think of where he just went in the startup we're doing right now, he went at 405. And when you're thinking of kind of where that goes around, he went basically right after Travis Hunter, right after A.J. Brown. Like he's in that range. Now, Lad went early, but I drafted Lad, so I really can't – I'm kind of biased. Like I can't give you that like where he went compared. But, I mean, he's sitting there, wide receiver still on the board. T. Higgins, Rome Odunze, Devonta, Rashee Rice is still on the board there. Emeka, those guys are still there in terms of Ryan. Now, that's probably a pretty appropriate value, right, in that range there. But I have seen Ryan go as high as, like, wide receiver 10 in startups like this before, right after, like, London and Harrison. Like, I've seen that. So I'm going to go Lad, safe floor. I think that, your point is right with the ceiling there. But I think that tied to Justin Herbert, even in this offense, he's just going to earn targets. So I'm okay if he can average over 100 targets, which would not shock me in his career, or at least the next 3 or 4 years, then I'm going to lean there.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. And like you said, you're pulling these things and doing the kind of this or that and comparing them to, we're pulling guys that we as a consensus have very close to each other. So
Yeah.
we're kind of pulling strings. They're fun discussions, but really when it comes down to it, we kind of like both of these guys in general where they are. And they're kind of close to each other in our rankings. So can you fault one guy for taking one guy or the other guy? No, but yeah, I mean, we've gone safe every time. So I thought maybe I'll take a chance on a Devy here and hit the other side this time.
No, that's what you have to do. Like we're
Yeah.
not. There's no wrong answers here. But hey, here's a thought question for you. We have a little extra time. That's not thinking about this. We had a discussion today in our Discord. We were talking about. Someone was asking me about like hey, I'm using your rankings for this. Here's the next guys available. And I said, hey, really in C2C and Devy, I look at rankings being very flexible because of team builds, like C2C especially. Like I think, as you build out your teams, you want to get value across the classes. There's, high production, all that kind of stuff. And Devy, I still think rankings are pretty fluid, especially if it's a combined draft, because really when you're looking at your team and you're building it, you might have Ryan Williams as your number one player on the board. But when you look at your team and you're sitting there and you're like, hey, but I can add Lad, and I already got let's say you had Josh Allen, you get Lad, or like maybe you could also swing like Amon-Ra or something to where like, hey, I could go win now. Like, so my big thing, and I'll ask you, Jay, what you think, as you build up a Devy roster, are you fluid with your rankings too? Like depending on how the team build is going, because I'm all about accumulating assets. Like I love accumulating assets as much as I possibly can. So, but if it's close, like you said, where these guys are very close and they're the same tier, I tend to lean towards NFL production a little bit more if they check a lot of those boxes. Young, targets, had a great production. I'm not drafting based on upside, right, with an NFL guy, because I can get upside with Ryan Williams. How do you play that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the right way to play it because we're all here trying to win, fantasy championships. And that's taking the safer guy. The lad McConkey is already a back end wide receiver one, getting you hopefully a lot of points. So, I mean, that's I think the safer way to do it. I think when I'm constructing the Devy teams or the C2C teams, like that's very, very important. But I also want to make sure that I have a few upside shots within my board. And it might not be this particular decision. It might not be Ryan Williams versus Lad McConkey. It might be a little bit further down the line where you take the upside shot. But I just want to make sure that I have those upside shots because that's where you get a tremendous increase in value. Say you get the Cam Coleman much, much later than what it takes to get Ryan Williams. And he's got that wide receiver one, very high end wide receiver one upside. And you can get him much later than Ryan Williams or a few rounds later or 1 round later than Ryan Williams. That's incredible value. And I want to have at least a few in my build, few of those upside shots that this guy, if he hits, can get me in that very high end elite type of level. And that I think also is a good strategy of ways to win. So yes, Lad McConkey helps you. It's the safer thing. It's the known assets. But at some point, I want to take a few. Maybe it's a handful. Maybe it's 5. Maybe it's 3, something like that. Shots on guys that will get you into that differentiated points per game. Because that, when you talk about building dynasties kind of thing, that's the kind of stuff where you get guys for values that people haven't valued correctly yet or still need time to value correctly over time. And you get those guys much cheaper than everybody else. And then, 3 years from now, you're looking at your team and you're like, well, man, I got 3 top 5 guys here sitting on one team, all because I took some risks in taking shots. But, you can't do that with every pick. You got to build a team that can actually go out and play.
Yeah.
So that's the other side of it. And you got to make sure that you kind of balance both of those perspectives.
All right. That's good. I like to bring up a little strategy talk, like just kind of when you kind of being fluid when you come into that. All right, let's get to one last quarterback battle. Then we're going rapid fire. But I had to throw on our boy LaNorris Sellers from South Carolina because he's been getting talked about. Buzz is out there about LaNorris Sellers. Dual threat monster guy, huge upside. I wrote a huge profile for you guys out there. The buzz is nationally getting started. You're starting to see a lot of draft guys talk about him now. So you're seeing the LaNorris Sellers hype 2025 summer hype going on right now. Last year, where he comes in 6'3", 240, passing grade 70.6, big time throw percentage at 4.9, turnover worthy play percentage at 4.6. That's his one. He's got to fix that a little bit. 2,500 yards passing, 18 touchdowns. He also was an incredible rusher of the football. On the other side, we have Sam Darnold, Seattle Seahawks quarterback here. Remember, this is a combined, like, hey, who would you rather have in a startup kind of idea here? Obviously, checks a lot of the boxes from last year. 36 touchdowns, 4,500 passing yards, 3.7% turnover-worthy play percentage, 5.4 big-time throw percentage, 77.5 passing grade. Obviously, with the Vikings, now he's with the Seattle Seahawks. So now it's a little bit of a difference out there in terms of what they want. Darnold, he got his contract, but it was a weird 1 year out type thing for his contract. So technically Seattle, he should be the starter there for 2 to 3 years, but Seattle's got this weird build going on where I think they're saying, hey, we can get out next year. So I think the question here with these two is, would you rather gamble on the traits, right? Like the traits of the sellers, like who could be upside QB1 of the 26th class, or could have to come back because he struggles with a very, very tough schedule down the stretch? Or do you take that possible 1 year, 2 year QB2, high-end QB2 with Darnold, which he was last year? There was borderline, top 10 weeks with him in fantasy with what he was able to put up in a different offense, though. So where are you leaning here with these two guys?
Honestly, it's really hard to decide because I'm not sure I really want to hold either one of these for the long term.
But who would you rather hold? That's the question.
I think sellers probably will command the higher premium, but I probably want to be a seller of both of these guys into something different from that perspective, because I think there's too much risk for each of them. And I'm not knocking sellers. I think he's a good QB, a good prospect. I don't have him as my QB1 of this 2026 class, but many people do. I think there's a lot of tools there, and I think there's a lot of things to like in this profile. And then Sam Darnold, who was a very, very high-end pick, came out of USC, did really well in college, got drafted highly. It didn't go so well, and now he's kind of in his resurgence, and played really well for the Vikings, and then now we're on the Seahawks, and we're in a weird rebuild / retool kind of situation that the Seahawks are doing there. He's throwing to Jackson Smith and Jigba. That's going to be his number one target, but they also got Cooper Kupp there.
Hey, no JSN slander on this podcast. What is this? What is this JSN slander?
No, I like JSN. I said wide receiver 1, man. I like him.
Well, but there was a little I don't know what that was. We can't hate on JSN.
That's your guy, and then Marquez Valdez-Scantling. So it's just a weird setup. And you talked about his contract, the outs that you have. I mean, sure, I think Sam Darnold's still decently young, but he's had a career in the NFL, and in a couple places it didn't go well, and now we're having a resurgence. So from my end, from my perspective, it's I can take this guy, I'll move off of him into something else that I feel has a bit more upside, has a bit more ability or momentum to rise up in rankings. Because I honestly think no matter how well Sam Darnold does, it's going to be hard to get his value to increase substantially from where it is right now. Are we going to rank? Are we ever going to rank Sam Darnold in the top 6, top 8 QBs? Probably not. Even if he's putting up tremendous amount of fantasy points, it's probably not that case. Now, maybe LaNorris sellers, maybe he's the guy, maybe he hits, and maybe you could get his upside up there. But those are all maybes, and there's a lot of risk there to his profile. So if I'm picking between the two, I'm probably picking sellers right now. But honestly, this both of these guys, I probably want to take the guy that I can get the most for and then sell that player for somebody else.
Yeah, I'm taking sellers here based on value, because I think that who would you rather hold, that question that we had, who would you rather hold? You want to hold LaNorris, because there's going to be guys that believe in this dude. And I like LaNorris sellers, but when I was doing the deep dive, he's got a lot of work to do as a passer, right? And I think that's one of those things that you have to look at as a passing quarterback this year. You really he needs to make sure that he hits a lot of metrics this year. You cannot have almost a 5% turnover worthy play percentage. There was a lot of throws he probably could have had more interceptions that he was out there on. That's a question mark there. And I like Sam. And when I go through the numbers right now, he had 9 top 10 finishes. So in fantasy, but a different scheme, different all kinds of stuff that you brought up too. I think just from a value perspective, who do I rather hold? Because the risk is less now. We're talking about deeper picks now. Like when you're in a startup, like combined, like looking at these guys, I'll take the upside of LaNorris. Like that's just kind of what I'm going to say there, just from a value perspective. But I don't disagree with you. I think they are both sells. Like if I can get something for LaNorris valued at, like when we're looking at our rankings overall, like, and I'm going through it where we have LaNorris at, like if you can get some guys around where he's going at, like for example, on the NFL side, like if you can go grab, I don't know, like Kamara on a win now team, I'm okay with that. Like if you're looking at the running back position and you're like, hey, I really need that running back and get maybe a pick back, sure, right? That's why we have our combined rankings, so you can kind of do that with. I would even like, even from like a Devy perspective, some guys that I might be a little higher on than LaNorris is like Caden Durham from LSU. And if someone really thinks LaNorris is that guy in Superflex, you might be able to get a Caden Durham plus an asset, right? Latzir Brooks is sitting out there, the freshman from Alabama. Julian Sayin from Ohio State. Like I think that could be an option where you believe in him as more as a quarterback, and then you can get a plus something on that side where you're kind of getting some value there. So I agree with Jay. I think on the trade value perspective, like those guys would be sellers there. Any final thoughts on this one before getting to rapid fire?
No, I think what it comes down to me is I think that I can get more for sellers than I can for Sam Darnold, and that's kind of how I think about this one in particular. I think just there's more upside. Now, if I was on the clock and had to pick, I'd probably still pick the sellers because I could sell him. But Sam Darnold is a QB that'll get you points right now, and if you need him in your build, you ran out of QBs. I can understand you taking a Sam Darnold at that range. It's just, both sells for me.
All right, let's go to rapid fire. We are going to make this rapid fire. We're going to get long-winded here. We're going to talk about it here.
Yeah.
I put some on here. So rapid fire. First up, Clemson wide receiver Bryant Wesco versus Philadelphia Eagles Devonta Smith. Jay, who would you rather have in that one?
I'm gonna go Devonta Smith right now, just because of the certainty. I really like Bryant Wesco. I think he's really up there. We need to see that huge year from him.
Yeah.
But if I was looking at what the upside could be, I think Bryant Wesco might has more upside than Devonta Smith, but right now I think it's safety at Devonta Smith. Got to take him.
Yeah, I caught Jay off guard, everybody, because I just saw him pop in our ranking sheet with his little profile picture because he wants to see where his rankings are. So he knows he's on the right time. I agree. I think Devonta Smith is a solid wide receiver too. I think he's actually undervalued right now. And I think, he could be their wide receiver one soon. I think A.J. Brown is there, obviously, this year. But I think Eagles can throw the ball a ton. I think we're going to see that as well. So I lean Devonta, but Bryant's right there. I think he has a big year this year ahead of him. I'll do the next one, then Jay can pop in. Wide receiver Jalen Waddle, Miami Dolphins. Wonder what's going to happen with Tyreek Hill there. I mean, I've seen a lot of Jalen Waddle talk versus Jordan Tyson, Arizona State wide receiver, who is considered by some, or many, being the wide receiver one in the class there. For me on this one, I'm going to go Jalen Waddle. It might be off the board here, but I think that he's young still. He can demand targets. He's got a contract. He's going to be the wide receiver one probably in that offense next year. Maybe this year if Tyreek gets moved. I still have question marks about Jordan Tyson's injuries, the things that go there in this 26 class as a whole. So I'll go Waddle. Where are you going?
I'm going to go Waddle too. I think Waddle is a huge value in Dynasty Fantasy football right now. I think you should be buying him. He's super cheap right now for what the potential points he can put up for you. In my Dynasty investor work, I think he's a screaming buy. Go buy Jalen Waddle. And one caveat on Bryant Wesco, versus Devonta Smith, the upside for Bryant Wesco is tremendous. So I like Bryant Wesco longer term. And next year, I could pick I might be picking Bryant Wesco over Devonta Smith if he really does put up the year I think he can.
Okay. All right. Next one. Minnesota running back Darius Taylor versus Lions running back David Montgomery, which are very close in terms of like our rankings, our value. Older prospect versus maybe a guy that's getting day 3 buzz now. People aren't really as high on Minnesota running back Darius Taylor. Where are you going?
I'm going Darius Taylor. I think the market share dynamics from him are incredible. There's a lot of things that are question marks, including draft capital, which is very important in my process. And I think he's got some work to do there, but I think he can put together a good year. David Montgomery is, we know what he is. And I think from an age perspective, is a declining asset, something that's moving down. So I'm going to take the shot on Darius Taylor, continuing having a great market share year, being the major part of Minnesota's offense, and hopefully that converts into some pretty good draft capital and a rise in value, as opposed to David Montgomery, who's sort of falling in value over time. Now he'll get you more points for sure, of course. But got to go with Darius Taylor's like sort of momentum upward as opposed to David Montgomery momentum down.
Yeah, no, I'm all aboard Darius Taylor train here on this one, just because a running back like David Montgomery is just a very, very declining asset, and Taylor could have a good first half of the year and get you value back, right? Like I think that he could. He looks really good. I'm not out on Darius Taylor at all. I've been kind of the stalwart guy on our quarters podcast, and guys like, hey, I still think he's a very good back. Like he had a phenomenal freshman year until he got injured. Last year was fine. I think if he does some things and improves, he's be right there. So I'll lean Darius Taylor here too. And you knew I had to throw in a Michigan quarterback before we get out of here. Michigan quarterback Bryce Underwood, true freshman quarterback versus Jackson Dart. He got drafted in the first round, late first round by the Giants here. I'm testing Jay's like first round capital theory here, but where are you going, Jay?
I'm going to go Bryce Underwood. I think there's a lot more value there with Bryce. I was one of the, well, not one of, there's a lot of people, but the numbers people really like Jackson Dart last year. It will be, and he goes first round. There's a chance that he might actually be a good NFL QB. We'll see how the situation plays out in New York, but there's a chance. Whereas before, maybe people didn't really like his prospect or didn't like his profile. There's a chance Jackson Dart might be usable in fantasy football from that perspective. But I think Bryce Underwood has a chance to go sort of wire best player in his class to then be the best player in his draft class and go first overall type of thing. He's got sort of that kind of ability to do something like that. He needs some help from a pass catching perspective in Michigan. But I do like what they're doing from the recruiting perspective. I do like they're bringing in a lot of assets. I think Bryce Underwood has a shot to be one of those premium type of values. If you go and look at your supplemental drafts, your in campus to Canton, or your freshman drafts, he's usually the first overall pick. If maybe he might fall to number 2 or something like that for that class, for his class. So I think he's one of those guys that can kind of keep up that value over time.
All right. This one's tough for me. I'm going to take Jackson right now. And this comes down to this weird freshman quarterback scare the hell out of me. So I made the same argument with Arch. So a few years ago, I said, don't draft Arch his freshman year. You draft him his sophomore year because the value is going to be much better. I truly still believe that. And we could see a scenario where Jackson Jackson Dart, after 8 games, Russell gets benched and then he starts, right? And then Jackson has a few games down the stretch from Malik Nabers and people start buying into him as being that QB2, where Bryce is going to struggle this year. I don't think people realize, I'm very cautiously optimistic about Bryce and Michigan's offense this year, but they still need weapons. They still need pieces. There's going to be flashes, but he's still a freshman coming in. And everybody wants to jump to the Cam Newton, comparisons and all that stuff with Bryce. He's going to need some time. Cam played at, junior college. He played at Florida with Tebow, then went to junior college, won a national championship, then went to Auburn. It takes time for these guys to get comfortable within that offense there. I'm going to lean Jackson just because I do think that scenario where he starts, gets a little plug, could give him more value now. Who do I think is a better player? I think it's Underwood. I think Underwood is a higher ceiling, no doubt, with these guys here. But I was a huge Jackson Dart guy throughout his college career too. So I like both players. I'm going to lean Jackson here in this range. I still think he's a value going to QB 24, 25 in startups. Now, who's going to get drafted in a startup in a Dynasty Devy combined? Underwood's going to go way earlier, and we're going to have that for you. We'll have it on our Substack once we complete this draft so you can see it. I know that, but that might be a scenario where you can trade and get an asset plus Dart, if you're willing to do that. And you got to wait 3 years for Underwood. more than likely. That's a long wait in terms of Devy quarterback lives, right? When we're thinking of lives out there and value spots there. So that's our rapid fire. That's our this or that. A lot of fun here going through the rankings. I do want to plug our rankings though. We just dropped a new sheet there. We updated our trade calculator, I think, for the better. Jay definitely put in some work there, a lot of work in that range, and trying to get that for the better there. So go check that out. Go below if you want all access to everything. There was some confusion from somebody out there. You just join our Patreon. You join our Patreon. It's the same price as our Substack. You get everything. Substack articles, our ranking sheet, all of our guides that we're dropping, the projections that we just dropped. You can find all of those on our Patreon and below. But if you just want the articles, you can just sign up there. I know with some people just like, hey, just want Substack. Those are the two options that you can have. You can find them on YouTube. If you're on the podcast, go check it out at thedevyroyale.com. Jay, any final parting thoughts here before we move on to next week? We're getting closer to football. It's coming.
Yeah, it comes closer. I would have to mention that with all this Michigan talk, Ohio State Buckeyes did actually win the national championship last year, even though we lost to Michigan. So
did you know?
I'll just throw that in there, and I think we're reigning national champs right now. So
yeah, you are, but you have lost to us 4 years in a row.
Yeah, true.
Just want to point that out. Can you really be a national championship if you lose to Michigan and don't go make the Big Ten championship?
Well, you can. It just happened for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
What happened before those 4 years though? The previous decade.
We'll see you all next week.
Yeah.